Two brothers and airstrikes. I can't think of a better combination. This ship, of course, the Gouden Leeuw, is the tier 10 Dutch cruiser, and its gimmick is these airstrikes. HE bombs that land in a square wherever you want to on the map within 13 kilometers of you. And they do quite a bit of damage. This ship, of course, has some Scharnhorst guns, which is actually not a very good thing. And its hull isn't great considering you actually take 60-second fires. Really, the airstrikes as your gimmick, you really rely on it to make this ship work. And because of that, I don't think the Gouden Leeuw is really the best cruiser at tier 10. It's not very consistent and is kind of difficult to play. Another problem is on a map like Two Brothers, you're forced to play on this island. Most maps have a position or two like this where you're going to get people within this 13-kilometer range. The problem becomes when you spawn on a flank that has open water, let's say, and then you want to go sit on an island in the middle of the map, giving up the entire flank. That's actually what happened in this game. I spawned around the C or B2 or 3 area, somewhere in there, and I gave up the flank. That's not something I usually do. I tend to recommend you play open water, even if your ship's really not meant for it. I did a video on that on the Worcester a few days ago, and, you know, I wasn't too effective that game, but I did try and help my team to not get flanked. This game was a little different, though. I wanted to make use of these airstrikes, and since Two Brothers really is a map that is two small fights broken up by this entire middle island section, I think it was okay to give up the 1-2 lines here. You can see the enemy team has basically done the same thing, and that Bismarck's getting a little bit tortured by our CV over there. So it's not a huge deal on this map specifically. Other ones, I probably wouldn't have done this. But this push is going to be good. I have a Bismarck, I have a Kurfürst, and an Alaska with me here. So we got ourselves some pretty decent close range ships. And given my airstrikes are softening up, especially this Prince Ruprecht, we're kind of nuking him here. We're going to have a good time on this push, hopefully. I, of course, don't want to go in first, but I do have my Hydro up. I think someone else popped their Hydro as well. Maybe I should have waited on mine. We're just trying to avoid the threat of torpedoes as much as possible, since that's really the main issue with pushing here. We have enough AA power, especially because the Gouden Leeuw has pretty good AA, that I don't think we have to worry about a tier 8 carrier. So realistically, this push isn't going to be too bad. We've already done 71,000 damage before we push in. That's crucial. It's going to allow us to kill a lot of ships much, much, much easier. Our Kurfürst decides to go in, and you can see all 3 of us roll up behind him. This is so cool. I don't see it too often, but I love it. Everybody's on the same page. As soon as the GK goes, we all go with him. It's awesome. We take a little hit. I think that was from the Petro, maybe. Our turtleback doesn't really work against battleships, but against smaller caliber shells, you do have a decent turtleback to avoid some citadels. Not many, but some. Of course, fires is going to be your biggest issue. That's why you're going to see me constantly focus the Nevsky when I can. Unfortunately, I waste an airstrike on the Ruprecht there, so not going to get too much damage for a little bit out of those. And I decide to shoot the Schultz, thinking the Petro would have gone down by now. And he finally does. That ship is just ridiculously tanky. Far, far, far more than the Gouden Leeuw. Even though the Petro doesn't get those airstrikes, I do think it's a much, much better ship for the vast majority of situations. And the Petro tanking all 4 of us, I think really demonstrates that. So we've taken out 2 of the enemy ships, and now our Kurfürst is just about to go down. So a pretty solid trade, especially given that pushing in, you are typically at a disadvantage. Unfortunately, we had HE for the broadside Bayard, but the Alaska shows us what a real super cruiser looks like and absolutely murders that man. Alaska, of course, is one of the best ships in the game, especially given its tier. At tier 9, it's just a ton of fun. I think the airstrike gimmick is very powerful when you can make use of it. This game is probably one of the better ones that I have using these airstrikes. But overall, more consistent guns generally is going to work out better, especially at a tier lower like the Alaska is. Fortunately, the Bismarck does get taken out. His flank could have been absolutely devastating. That could have messed up this entire play. The other nice part here, we see the Missouri has actually caught up with us. Pretty fast ship. He was trying to play the flank, which I do like, but now that he saw us all pushing in, he's decided to come with us. This is a really rare example where pretty much everyone on our team, outside of the Vermont, which maybe the Vermont's just too slow, actually decided to push in, and it went so well. I had a ton of fun playing this one. I think that matches like this, where you get to play at closer ranges, are more fun. I enjoy them much better, and that's why I wish the map design promoted this a little bit more. Two Brothers is a map I really like because it splits up the forces on each team, so you're really fighting two 6v6 fights, and because of the island positioning, you actually have the opportunity to push up relatively closely. And even on the flanks, there's a few islands that allow you to push in as well. I really like this map design as it promotes closer range gameplay, unlike the vast majority of the tier 10 maps. I think that the Gouden Leeuw is probably just a mediocre tier 10 cruiser. What you're seeing here is pretty difficult to do. Leading a Montana full speed at max range there with the airstrikes takes a lot of practice, and even with practice, I'm gonna miss those a lot of the time. So if you're thinking this ship looks like a good time to grind, or you're thinking, oh, this kind of close range kind of interests you, I'd recommend just grinding out the Petro instead. It's gonna do better in these close range engagements most of the time, since you don't rely on a gimmicky airstrike. But I won't lie, when I do play my Gouden Leeuw and I get Two Brothers, I know I'm gonna have a good time. Part of me wishes I had spawned in the middle. Going down middle Two Brothers with this ship, with these airstrikes, is absolutely hilarious. And unfortunately didn't quite get to do that in this one, but I have tried it in the past, and it's really fun. That's the other really awesome part about this map, that middle channel. It adds an interesting, unique dynamic to a map that could have been a little boring and stale had they left it as an entire circle, and whoever won the flank would have just ended up going in an entire circle without the option to cut through the middle. I love playing this map, and unfortunately it doesn't really come up too often. All we have left to do here is farm out this Montana, and then that's going to be our win. Seeing a push like this is a ton of fun, and it really reminds me that there are plenty of people interested in pushing in this game. It just doesn't happen all the time. I wish it did, and I wish the game incentivized it a little more than it does. We pretty much had the perfect scenario here where we didn't really have to deal with torpedoes, didn't have to deal too much with a carrier. So there's a lot that could have gone wrong that actually didn't, and we got pretty lucky to pull this kind of push off. But it's a lot of fun when it happens, and it just makes me want it to happen more because it's so much fun. So that's going to be the Gouden Leeuw on Two Brothers game. We ended up decently with 150k damage, and surprisingly, a lot of that actually came from the airstrikes. Most of my matches honestly don't look like that. They're usually a lot of gun damage. But in this one, we managed over 50k from the airstrikes, and of course some of those lit some fires as well. So while this ship isn't one that I necessarily recommend everyone go get, it can work and it can be fun if you're given the right type of game. The commander that I'm using, of course, is pretty standard, I'd say, for these ships, since we want to maximize our gimmick in our airstrike. So taking focus firing training gives us a little bit of reload, and then I'm just trying to stay alive since we do struggle against fires. We get our heals back a little quicker on this ship, which is a nice gimmick as well, but taking 60-second fires is rough. So you want to be healing as much as you possibly can and trying to stay alive. We're also taking pretty standard stuff given the poor reload on these guns. They're really not that great, so we want to maximize that as much as possible. And again, taking airstrike even over something like propulsion, so we get those airstrikes back a little bit quicker. Personally, I really don't like having airstrikes in the game, but since they're here, they are an interesting gimmick to take advantage of every once in a while. But I'd prefer them to not be in the game. The less planes, the better, in my opinion. But let me know what you think in the comments down below, and thank you very much for watching.